Jasfir Mahil, who is creating a cultural revolution, transformation. Thank you. Which is revolutionary.
So we can't eat money and we can't drink oil. Well, horses could tell us that for free, right? These statements may seem to be simplistic truisms, self-evident cliches, common sense. Except, of course, when you look at your bottom line in business and you realise that you are struggling to pay the rent, the bills, and the privilege of living with your horses who need to be fed and protected after all. And then you wonder, who's eating all your money?
As an educator, I work with horses to facilitate experiential learning and development. And as part of my PhD, I'm exploring the relationship between business culture, which includes the way we work with horses, and creativity. Some of you may say it's common sense that in business we focus on the bottom line. In other words, financial gain and profitability. Or you may be inclined to say that I want to focus on the top line, which includes trust, values, and visions.
We can think of wealth in terms of profitability, and we can think of wealth in terms of prosperity. In my view, profitability is common sense, whereas prosperity is good sense. In response to the question, how can we transform common sense into good sense and creatively generate social and cultural capital, I'll explain the difference between common sense and good sense, introduce a concept of creativity with 7 attributes, and highlight the importance of trust, values, and visions in generating social and cultural capital.
Let's start with common sense.
The Italian philosopher Antonio Gramsci questioned the assumptions we make when we talk about common sense. For example, statements such as, we can't drink oil and we can't eat money contain relevant truths interpreted within a particular social and cultural context. Likewise, the business common sense that we need to have a robust bottom line needs to be contextualized socially, culturally, and historically.
For example, it used to be common sense that men go out to work and women stay at home to look after the children. Judging by the ratio of men to women here in this room today, I think it's safe to say that it used to be common sense that women stay at home to do the housework. For many horse trainers, it's common sense that horses need to be whipped into obedience, and it would seem irresponsible to question that common sense. You may have noticed that common sense isn't always good sense. And as Antonio Gramsci explained, sometimes common sense lacks substance, and it doesn't fulfill our particular needs. For example, in business, there are many business structures, ranging from those that focus on profitability on one hand, and on the other hand, business structures that focus on meeting the individual needs of the so-called NGOs, the social enterprises, the charities. But when we work with horses, our business doesn't always fit neatly into any of these existing business structures because it's neither a corporation nor a charity. So, working with horses the way we do as educators and as business owners, we need a new conception of wealth, and we need to reflect on our position in relation to creation of this wealth. So let's ask ourselves, what do we mean by wealth? The French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu explained that wealth is much more than merely financial capital. He emphasized the importance of social and cultural capital, which includes our relationships, our skills, our talents, and symbolic capital.
For example, the Horse-Dream logo, the EAHAE membership.
Entrepreneurs often allude to these non-tangible sources of capital when they say, I built my business from nothing. The word nothing may be misleading. It may be more accurate to say that they had no money and therefore they built their business on social, cultural and symbolic capital.
How do we generate this wealth, this social and cultural capital, which isn't limited to finance? In his book, The Rise of the Creative Class, the American urbanist Professor Richard Florida claims that creativity is the new economy and that creativity is the new currency.
This research shows that in every part of the world, across the globe, across the board, businesses that are thriving and flourishing are relying on the creativity of their workforce, led by the so-called creative class. The creative class is a synthesis between the traditional working class and the middle class.
As equine assisted practitioners, we are positioned in this global creative class, and we have a choice to make about whether we work with our horses for prosperity or for profitability.
And this choice is a matter of life and death for horses. Those who choose profitability and productivity will kill or sell their horses when they are no longer profitable. That's common sense. Those who focus on prosperity and relationships will struggle to be guided by their common sense. When we have these difficult decisions to make about how, when, and why our horses live or die, we can use the philosophical ideas of Gramsci, Bourdieu, Florida, amongst many others, to transform common sense into good sense and creatively generate social and cultural capital. The key word is creativity.
What do we mean by creativity? When we hear people say, I'm not very creative, it indicates a narrow paradigm of what is meant by creativity, focusing either on the characteristics of the person or the features of the product, and forgetting important attributes such as the importance of persuasion in causing a cultural transformation. As part of my PhD research, I synthesized some of the existing research into creativity to highlight 7 important attributes of creativity: the process, the person, place, pressures, products, permanence, and the importance of persuasion.
Persuasion is essential for causing a cultural transformation. and making sure that society values our work.
Societies are represented by gatekeepers.
Now, gatekeepers are not always dragons, as someone suggested yesterday. Each one of us here is, has been, and will be a gatekeeper at some point in our lives. As a teacher, signing off accreditations and qualifications. As a judge, evaluating the quality of work. And as conference organisers, deciding who gets to speak for how long and when. Each one of us at some point is a gatekeeper, and the power and the given authority to decide who is seen to be valuable and recognised for the work that they do, and who is seen to be a charlatan. Gatekeepers have the power to either open or close doors to opportunities for others.
I'm suggesting that we can be persuasive of gatekeepers and as gatekeepers through trust, shared values and co-created visions. First of all, trust. From an early age, we learn to trust those we identify as our family and our friends, and we learn to be afraid of those we classify as strangers. Life experience teaches us that the glue that keeps our relationships, families and communities together is trust, and we all know that without trust, these relationships break down.
We tend to trust those who are familiar. The word familiar comes from family. In other words, we trust those who remind us of our family. However, creativity doesn't thrive on familiarity. Creativity thrives on diversity. And research has shown that communities that attract the greatest level of diversity, for example, London, San Francisco, Berlin, are also the communities that generate the highest level of creativity. So, that's true. That is the research of Richard Florida. So, building relationships with people who are different to us, who are diverse, unfamiliar, facilitates creativity. We can all learn to deepen our level of trust by widening that circle that we call our family, by expanding our circle of friends, and by increasing our awareness of societies and cultures that are different to our own. In addition to deepening our trust of others, we need to learn to become more trustworthy. And it's useful to bear in mind that people tend to trust us when we are connected. The more connected we are, the more people consider us to be trustworthy. So,
if you had never seen me before, you may find it difficult to trust me without a reference point, as in the picture on the left. You may find it easier to trust me when I'm in a familiar context, as in the picture on the right, as part of something bigger than myself, in relationship with things which are familiar to you, in this case, the horses.
It's the same tendency that results in politicians who appear to be happily married with families just like our own tend to get more votes than those who are single and disconnected. And it's the same reason why people trust us when we work in partnerships compared with when we work as sole traders on our own. And it's the same reason why many successful business people advocate working in masterminds and collaborating on projects.
Working with horses helps us to develop this essential skill of trust and trustworthiness. The extent to which horses trust us is not based on our racial origins and the colour of our skin. They don't care how tall or short we are. They are unbiased towards our accent and they don't mind how we're dressed.
Many people place their trust in those they say have high net worth because they claim to have huge salaries and buoyant bank accounts. But horses know we can't eat money. Another way that we can be persuasive of gatekeepers is through shared values. Values arise from our ideology, the way we see life. Sometimes the values that we have are very different to our families or the communities and the cultures in which we were born. When our values are very different to those that we love and trust, when our values seem to undermine the very fabric of our society, when our values seem to be in conflict with our culture, it takes a great deal of confidence to stand our ground. For example, I'm a vegetarian, whereas most of my family and friends are not. I see the world as an interconnected web of life, whereas most organisations I have worked for have placed me in a rigid hierarchy where I felt like a circle in a square peg, and that causes stress. And it undermines the trust that is required in order to be persuasive.
When values are not in alignment, for example, if your work is based on creativity, freedom and circular processes, and your judges are measuring the quality of your work in terms of efficiency, safety and linear outcomes, there's likely to be mutual disappointment rather than mutual respect.
Different values require different strategies. So we need to be very clear whether we are working towards creativity or efficiency, freedom or safety, circular processes or linear outcomes. And it's essential that our judges share our values in order to be judged fairly.
The third way we can be persuasive in societies is through our shared visions. Many of us have at least vague personal visions about who we desire to become, how we foresee our businesses growing, and our lives improving. Throughout history, people have found themselves in societies that can no longer support the visions that they have for themselves and their communities. People continue to risk their lives and their livelihoods following their visions of a better life outside of societies where trust has eroded in every relationship, where values are in bitter conflict, and where visions have disintegrated into chaos.
Maybe you recognise what I'm describing. The war zone of corporate cultures. Maybe you have sought refuge from these corporate cultures, escaping into the world of horses with your dreams and your hopes of a better life, where your health is your wealth and your relationships are valued more than the raw data that you produce to increase that bottom line. The good news is that you can always recreate, reconstruct, redevelop anything that you've previously created, constructed or developed. But that's also the bad news. We waste our lives trying to recreate what we previously rejected, but now we believe we have lost. And we become locked into old visions that are outdated and obsolete. Visions are valuable when they are alive, responsive, and when they're shared. And when visions are co-created, that is when they cause a cultural transformation. To conclude, let me talk about 3 stories that illustrate the power of trust, values and vision. The first story is the story of the famous explorer, Sir Ernest Shackleton.
In 1914, Sir Ernest Shackleton, according to legend, placed this advertisement to attract 27 crew members to join him on a dangerous expedition to explore the South Pole in Antarctica.
Obviously, the people he was appealing to shared his vision because thousands of men applied. 27 men were selected. They set out to Antarctica. Unfortunately, they never arrived at their desired destination because as they got close to Antarctica, the ship got stuck in ice and the men were left stranded in the wilderness. But the reason this story is a legend is that although it took them more than 2 years of trekking through the wilderness, each one of those men made it safely back home.
The second story is about Black Elk, one of the Native American leaders who prophesied back in the 1890s that the Native Americans would come together in order to save Mother Earth, and he also prophesied about the so-called Black Snake, which many believe refers to the Dakota pipeline, which is why you will continue to hear protests. We cannot drink oil.
So that is an example of a vision which has survived through 7 generations and is materializing, is manifesting itself now. And the third story is the story of EAHAE, which was conceived as a small idea which Gerard and Karen shared with their friends. Sharing of that vision has resulted in us coming from all different parts of the world together here through trust, through values, shared values, through collaboration. It's an example of a vision which has survived over a decade and will continue to do so. And if you look at the definition that I have of creativity, you will find that the way that this has worked through collaboration, that this is an example of creativity. To conclude, what is unique about your business? Well, wherever I go, I'm always pleasantly surprised that there is no one in the room like me, which is good news. And when you look around, you will notice that there's no one in the room who's like you. Each one of us is unique, and creativity thrives in that uniqueness, that diversity. And we cannot be diverse unless we are in relationship. We cannot be diverse alone. We are diverse when we are in a group. So diversity occurs in relationship. Diversity thrives on creativity thrives on diversity. Creativity thrives in relationships through collaboration. So trust, values and visions. And how can all of that transform common sense into good sense? So using the ideas of Gramsci, Bourdieu, Florida, and each one of us here, everyone here has their own unique perspective. And so similar to the story that we formed yesterday, that's one of the ways, by connecting together, that we can transform common sense into good sense.
Wow. Thank you so much, Jasbir.